Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The deep crease between Father's brows finally relaxed. "Tell me whatever you need," he said. "I'll have someone prepare it." After saying that, he pushed me outside and shut the door. Standing in front of the closed door, I took a deep breath. I knew Father meant well, and this matter had indeed been handled somewhat recklessly on my part, but he had actually hit me. Since I was born, this was the first time he had ever laid a hand on me. My head didn't hurt very much, but my heart did. So I secretly decided that the new belt I had made for him yesterday, I would no longer give it to him, even by the time dinner came. I was still a little angry. But when Father personally prepared an entire table filled with my favorite dishes and gently tried to coax me, he did not lift his head. He grabbed the horsewhip and ran off, and the burly men behind him quickly followed. One after another they disappeared, and the farce finally came to an end. The crowd that had gathered nearby also dispersed in a hurry. I glanced at the man dressed in black. Seeing that he could still stand steadily on his own feet, I paid him no further attention and led Luna Xiao quickly toward the bookstore. But before I could even take 2 steps, a dark figure appeared in front of me. No need to thank me. Without raising my head, I waved my hand casually, intending to walk around him and leave. Yet he stepped sideways and blocked my path. "Didn't you just say that I was your man? Take me with you." I lifted my head, about to speak, but the moment I saw his face I froze. Why did this man look even more fierce than my elder brother? His face was somewhat similar to Marcus Yun's. Both had sharp, chiseled features as though carved with a blade, and both carried a cold expression. But Marcus's coldness was distant and indifferent, more like a calm disregard for the world around him. The man before me, however, radiated an intense aura of killing intent. Yet if one ignored that icy exterior, his appearance was even more handsome than Marcus's. If he had been born in the capital, I feared the title of the #1 cold and handsome man of the capital that my brother held would have to be handed over to him. Noticing that his eyes were fixed on me, I suddenly remembered what he had just said. Afraid he might misunderstand and think that I wanted him to repay me with his body, I hurriedly explained, "I only saved you on a whim. You don't need to take it to heart. Go wherever you want." He did not answer. Instead, he slipped his right hand into his robe and took out an object, holding it in front of me. I glanced at it, and was immediately shocked. Wasn't that the jade pendant my father cherished the most? He had not worn it for a long time. I had even thought it was lost. How did it end up in this man's hands? "You are?" I looked at him and asked. But when my eyes met his sharp phoenix-shaped gaze, I suddenly paused. Those eyes. Why did they seem somewhat familiar? "You don't remember me?" he asked, frowning. I searched through my memories but could not recall anything, so I shook my head. His expression tightened, and the emotions on his face became difficult to read. Suddenly he lowered his head, covering his mouth as he coughed several times. Each cough grew heavier than the last, as if he were about to cough out his lungs. "Are you all right?" Since he possessed my father's personal jade pendant, he must be an old acquaintance of my father. I could not help but ask with concern, "I'm fine. Please take me to see your father." Thinking about the books I had yet to buy, I looked at the man before me who seemed about to collapse at any moment. In the end, I decided to take him home first. On the way there, he kept lowering his head intentionally or unintentionally, avoiding crowded places, as though afraid that others would see his face. Since his background was unclear, and for safety's sake, I did not bring him directly to see my father. Instead, I asked Luna Xiao to take the jade pendant to him first, while I remained in the main hall waiting with the man. To my surprise, my father arrived extremely quickly, almost as fast as when my mother called for him and he disappeared. "Ethan Chin, you finally arrived." My father, Victor Yun, strode in front of him. But the moment he saw his pale face, he was startled. "You're injured?" Ethan Chin. This man was Ethan Chin, the prince who guarded the northern frontier. While I was still standing there in a daze, my father had already arranged for him to be taken to a guest room. Luna Xiao was summoned over to examine his injuries. This man truly had remarkable endurance. The wound on his abdomen was deep, and he had also been poisoned. Yet earlier he had still managed to fight with those burly men for so long. Anyone else would have collapsed from the poison long ago, but he had held on until now before finally losing consciousness. His willpower was astonishing. After examining the wound, Luna Xiao spoke, and there was a trace of admiration in her voice that was hard to miss. Curious about just how serious the injury was, I leaned forward to take a look. But before I could see anything, my father slapped the bed curtain shut. "Men and women should keep proper distance. Is this something a young lady like you should be looking at?" My father said unhappily. "Luna is younger than me, yet she can look. Why can't I?" Having been suddenly smacked away, I felt somewhat wronged. "You're a young lady. Luna is also a young lady. I've dragged her here to examine a man's injuries. Do you think her reputation will still matter afterward?" My father had been about to scold me further, but after hearing this, his expression turned a little awkward. Looking at Luna Xiao, he sighed helplessly. "There's nothing we can do. The physicians outside cannot be trusted. His situation is special, so we can only adapt to circumstances." "Miss, you need not worry," Luna said calmly. "Since I was 5 years old, I've been learning to treat injuries. I've seen all kinds of bodies. In my eyes they're nothing but piles of flesh. Whether it's a person or a pig makes no difference." She turned to look at me as she spoke. Her eyes were like stagnant water, emotionless, even more lifeless than Marcus's usual gaze. It seemed that nothing in the world could stir even the slightest ripple in her emotions. Only then did I feel relieved. But a pig? Thinking about the slabs of red and white pork I often saw when passing by the butcher shop, I immediately lost all interest in looking. There was really no need to treat him like a pig. My father was momentarily speechless after hearing Luna's explanation. Then he asked, "Can you cure this poison?" Luna nodded. Only then did the deep crease between my father's brows finally relax. "Tell me whatever you need. I'll have someone prepare it." After saying that, he drove me out of the room and shut the door. Standing in front of the tightly closed door, I took a deep breath. I knew my father meant well. Perhaps I had indeed acted somewhat inappropriately today. But he had actually hit me. Growing up, this was the first time he had ever struck me, although it didn't hurt much physically. My heart ached. I decided that the belt I had made for him yesterday would no longer be given to him. By dinner time, I was still a little angry, but when my father personally prepared a whole table of dishes that were all my favorites, and even coaxed me gently, my anger immediately vanished. "Connor, have you ever saved Ethan Chin before?" Halfway through the meal, my father suddenly asked. "No. If you call it saving, I only helped him casually today. But before today, definitely not." I answered in confusion, unable to understand why my father suddenly asked such a question. I had never met him before. How could I have saved him? Perhaps it happened too long ago, and you were still young at the time, so you forgot, my father said. Ethan Sheen told me that the person who saved his life when he was young was you. But he only remembers your appearance, not your identity. Today, when you saved him, you said you were my daughter. When he saw your face, he finally confirmed it. I shook my head. I really have no impression. He said it happened at the frontier. I'm guessing it was when you were 10 years old. From childhood until now, you've only been to the frontier once. That year I was seriously injured and almost died. Your mother brought you and your elder brother to visit me. At that time the situation was chaotic. No one was watching you closely. Did you run off somewhere and accidentally save someone? 10 years old. The frontier. I slowly set down my chopsticks and thought for a moment. Then I suddenly remembered. Back then, the military physicians all said my father would not survive. I refused to believe it. I remembered reading in a book of strange tales about a kind of herb that could bring the dead back to life and reconnect broken bones. So I secretly ran up the mountain to search for it, afraid my mother wouldn't allow me to go. I didn't tell her. Later, beneath a tree, I saw a man covered entirely in blood. It was raining heavily at the time. Although I was frightened, I thought that saving a life would accumulate blessings for my father, so I dragged him into a nearby cave. Just as I was about to leave, a group of masked men in black carrying sabers appeared outside, searching for someone. I could tell they were not good people, so I quickly found some grass and covered the cave entrance. Unexpectedly, they searched outside the entire night. The blood-soaked man and I were trapped in that cave together all night. Halfway through the night he developed a high fever. Afraid he might die beside me, I stayed up all night watching him anxiously. At dawn he finally woke up groggily and asked for my name. I was afraid he might be a bad person, so I casually made up a name instead of telling him my real one. He told me his name too, saying that if I ever needed help in the future, I could find him. Oh, right. No wonder the name Ethan Sheen had sounded so familiar earlier. So it was because he had told me back then, but I hadn't taken it seriously at all. At the time his face had been covered in blood. After I helped him send a signal to contact his subordinates, I ran away immediately. When I returned to the military camp, I remained frightened for a long time, feeling as though I had barely escaped death. It does seem like something like that happened, I said guiltily, glancing carefully at my mother. At that time she had been staying in my father's camp to take care of him. Since my father was alone there, she never knew that I had run outside for the entire night, and I had never dared to tell her. If she had known I had placed myself in such danger, she would probably have twisted my arm off. Seeing my mother's expression darken, I hurriedly threw myself into her arms. Mother, don't be angry. Everything is already in the past. Didn't I come back safely? After that incident I became much more cautious and stopped acting so recklessly. You could even say that misfortune helped me grow. Besides, I'm older now. I've learned martial arts from father for several years, and there are people protecting me. Something like that will definitely never happen again. My mother lowered her head and looked at me. She wasn't angry, but her eyes gradually turned red. It's all my fault. I brought you there but failed to watch over you carefully. If anything had happened to you, for the rest of my life as she spoke, she burst into tears. All three of us were stunned. Even when my father had nearly died back then, my mother had forced herself to stay strong and had never cried in front of us. Now we hurriedly took turns comforting her. Even my elder brother Marcus Yun, who rarely spoke gently, said several soft words he would normally never utter. After a long while, my mother finally stopped crying. But the moment she stopped, she grabbed my ear. Have you truly remembered the lesson this time? Absolutely. More real than real gold, I swore, raising my hand. Even if you have a bit of skill now, your embroidered pillow martial arts are nothing in front of real experts, she said sternly. In the future, if anything happens, don't step forward yourself. Let your brother and father handle it. Do you understand? I understand, I replied repeatedly. Only then did she let go. Where is Ethan Sheen now? Rubbing my slightly aching ear, I began looking for the culprit. After all, I had saved him twice, yet he had still caused me to get punished. He left, my father sighed. Left? But weren't his injuries very serious? I asked in surprise. I've already told him everything that needed to be said. He was afraid of implicating us. After waking up, he had his subordinates take him away. The poison in his body has been partially neutralized by Luna Shao, and the wound on his abdomen has been bandaged. As long as he rests properly, he'll be fine. Luna detoxified him and bandaged his wound? My elder brother suddenly asked. My father nodded in confusion. Immediately, Marcus's expression darkened. Seeing that look on his face, I suddenly remembered what Luna Shao had once said, that my brother had once saved her life, and she had come to protect me in order to repay that debt. At that time, I had still been a little doubtful. My elder brother Marcus Yun had always been someone who disliked meddling in other people's affairs. He also did not like interacting with women. I truly could not imagine what kind of favor he could possibly have done for Luna Shao. But now, looking at his expression, I suddenly seemed to understand something. Could it be that an iron tree that had stood barren for 1,000 years had finally blossomed? In my mind, Luna's face appeared. The one even colder than my brother's. TSK. It seemed my elder brother's road ahead would be a very long one. After Marcus asked his question and then fell silent again, my father did not pay any further attention to him and instead changed the topic. Madam, if there's nothing important to do lately, you should start storing more grain, my father said to my mother with a worried look. Did something happen? My mother immediately sat up straight and asked. Ethan Sheen told me some news. When he traveled from the frontier to the capital, he saw many refugees along the way. After asking around, he learned that many regions have been suffering from drought. The local officials have been concealing the situation, so even now many people in the capital still don't know about it. After saying this, my father turned to look at Marcus. Don't you know many extraordinary people? Ethan Sheen said that in a small city in the south, a plague might have appeared. Since the number of infected people is still small, he isn't completely certain. Since you two have nothing to do at home, why don't you go and take a look? Marcus pondered for a moment before replying, I'll take Luna with me. Her master is ghost physician Mo. Her medical skills and knowledge of poisons are both exceptional. And your younger sister? Who will protect her? My father immediately objected. Didn't you assign Luna to protect her in the first place? Marcus said. My father shook his head. Ethan Sheen's injuries cannot be unrelated to Adrian Sheen. Since he has already made a move, our family will not have peaceful days ahead. Considering the relationship between our family and Ethan Sheen, trouble is inevitable. Connor going out is nothing more than wandering around anyway. With natural disasters and plagues appearing now, it's safer for her to stay at home. I stared at my brother. Brother. Are you really my biological brother? Now that you have someone in your heart, you've already forgotten about your little sister? Just as my father was about to continue speaking, I quickly intervened. If I can't go out, then I won't. I usually only go out to look for storybooks anyway. I can just have the servants buy them for me. Right now dealing with the epidemic is more important. If it's real, then this matter is extremely serious. Of course, that wasn't my real reason. After all, my brother had finally fallen for someone. It wasn't easy. Naturally, I wanted to create opportunities for him. I truly wanted to see how someone as cold and emotionless as my brother would treat the person he liked. And I absolutely refused to admit that what I really wanted to see was how my always meticulous, calculating brother would eventually fail miserably in front of Luna Xiao. Seeing my reaction, my father no longer insisted, but I became even more confused. What kind of relationship did Ethan Chin actually have with our family? Why did my father believe everything he said without hesitation? Even my brother did not seem suspicious. Thinking this, I simply asked directly, "Ethan Chin is the man who once saved my life," my father said slowly, word by word. I froze. How come I didn't know about that? I asked. Then I glanced at my mother and brother, whose expressions showed no surprise at all. You all knew? You just didn't tell me? At that moment, I felt like my heart had been shattered into pieces. You were still young back then, and your temperament was unstable, my father explained. The late emperor was extremely wary of military officials forming ties with members of the imperial family. The matter of Ethan Chin saving my life was never publicized. Only a few people knew. We were afraid you might accidentally say something you shouldn't, so we decided not to tell you. Besides, our family never expected you to repay him for anything anyway. Not able to keep secrets, never expected me to repay him. Hearing my father's honest evaluation of my childhood self, I suddenly became certain of something. Yes, this man was definitely my biological father, perhaps realizing his words sounded a little harsh. My father looked somewhat embarrassed and added, "Who would have thought that in the end, it would actually be you who repaid the life-saving favor for me? You even saved him twice. It seems I underestimated you." Fine, whether the epidemic was real or not, I didn't know yet, but the drought was absolutely real. My mother immediately bought a large amount of grain, and within just a few short days, the capital was already filled with refugees. The news about the drought could no longer be concealed. One noon, my mother was sitting in the courtyard going through account books. I sat beside her, helping handle some small matters. At that moment, the steward led a man inside. I had never seen him before. "Manager Lu, what is it?" My mother asked. It was obvious that she was quite familiar with him. "Madam," Manager Lu said respectfully, "today Bianca Bai came to our pawn shop. She wants to sell her shop. From what she implied, she intends to sell it completely. She asked how soon the transaction could be completed. She urgently needs cash." Oh. My mother thought for a moment before smiling meaningfully. Her shops have been suppressed recently and have been losing money almost constantly. She must have heard the news about the drought as well. She's probably planning to abandon a sinking ship, sell everything for cash so she can stockpile grain and turn the situation around. If I hadn't noticed that you were capable and assigned you to manage that pawn shop personally, I wouldn't normally visit there. Bianca Bai doesn't know that the shop belongs to my people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have overheard this information so easily. My mother put down her brush, clearly in a very good mood. "Madam, what should we do now?" Manager Lu asked with a troubled expression. When Bianca Bai talked about selling the shop, she repeatedly emphasized that she would redeem it in the future. She told me not to sell it to anyone else beforehand. If she says you can't sell it to anyone else, then you can't. My mother said calmly. Right now she desperately needs money. Just tell her you can buy all of her shops, but that your cash flow is tight. Lower the price as much as possible. Press her hard. Push the price down to the absolute minimum. As for her condition about not selling to others beforehand, that's impossible. She needs money. You need profit. Now that news of the drought has spread in the capital, anyone with spare money will start stockpiling grain. Other pawnshops may not even have enough cash available to purchase so many of her shops at once. Even if they did, they would probably prefer to use their money to buy grain instead. You don't need to be afraid of her. The tougher you act, the better. If she wants to sell, she'll sell. If not, let her go elsewhere. In the end, she'll come back obediently. My mother slowly analyzed the situation with calm confidence. Manager Lu's eyes grew brighter the more he listened. After receiving such clear instructions, he immediately left in high spirits. Once he was gone, my mother called the steward over. A few days ago, when I bought grain, I met with several managers from different grain shops. Go visit them again. Tell them that the price I forced on them before made them lose quite a bit of money. From now on, I'll purchase all grain at 3 times the previous price. In return, they must reserve most of the grain in their warehouses for me. And one more thing, she continued, you must tell them that if Bianca goes to them to buy grain, they must sell it to her at the same triple price that I'm paying. If this plan succeeds, then in the future, no matter how much grain I purchase from their shops, I will give them an extra share of the profit for their own pockets. After giving the instructions, the steward acknowledged the order and left. Once the courtyard was empty, I looked at my mother. Injuring the enemy by 1,000 while hurting yourself by 800. Mother, is it really worth it? In the end she'll still be able to buy grain and recover her losses. But you'll lose so much money for no reason. Hearing this, my mother laughed and lightly tapped my head. My dear child, you're still too naive. The money I spend on grain is nothing to me. But to Bianca, every single coin must be used carefully. For her, it's the final straw that might save her life. If she can't turn those shops into grain, and without money, her family will truly fall into poverty. As for recovering her losses, she won't. This time, I'll make sure she loses so badly that she'll have to beg for food. My mother said it decisively. When it came to business, she truly had an extraordinary eye. She never did anything unless she was certain of success. Hearing her say this, I felt reassured and obediently stayed at home, waiting to see how she would deal with Bianca. Half a month later, the drought completely erupted. Outside the city gates, refugees crowded everywhere. The capital was already overflowing with them. Adrian Cheen could no longer pretend not to see the situation. Minister Carter, the Minister of Revenue, personally came to visit our residence, hoping to borrow money from my mother. The money that Bianca donated, wasn't it originally meant to build a summer palace? My mother said calmly. Using it for disaster relief could at least sustain things for a while. Besides, during the reign of the late emperor, there were few wars, and natural disasters were rare. There were no struggles for the throne either. Every year the common people paid their taxes honestly. Surely the national treasury cannot be so empty that it cannot produce even a little relief money. Unless... My mother paused slightly. Someone has been embezzling. The moment she said the word embezzling, Minister Carter's face changed drastically. He could no longer maintain even basic courtesy. With a flick of his sleeve, he stormed out. Naturally, my mother refused to lend the money. Mother, I asked afterward, if the Ministry of Revenue truly has no money, Are we really not going to help? Of course we will, my mother replied. The reason your grand merchant won, your grandfather, was respected as the richest merchant in Jiangnan was not simply because he had money. More importantly, he had a kind heart. Our family motto is, when prosperous, help the world. When poor, cultivate virtue. During the late emperor's reign, there were several droughts and floods. Each time, your grandfather donated a great deal of money. That earned him an excellent reputation. Many people who once received his help later returned the favor. That's how his wealth continued to grow. Your lady one, your grandmother, often reminded us of that family teaching. I've always treated it as an unbreakable rule. I will definitely donate money, my mother continued, but I will absolutely not donate it to the Ministry of Revenue. And certainly not to Adrian Sheen. Otherwise, in the end, who knows whose pocket the money will flow into? She sneered lightly. Then who will you give it to? I asked, puzzled, to Ethan Sheen. He'll return very soon. The court ministers will repeatedly submit memorials urging Adrian Sheen to appoint someone to handle disaster relief. If Adrian Sheen truly has no money in his hands, he will certainly assign the most troublesome task to the person he fears the most. At that time, I'll hand the money directly to Ethan Sheen. That way I won't need to run around buying grain everywhere. It will save me a great deal of trouble. My mother rubbed her temples as she spoke. Previously, I had heard that Ethan Sheen had entered the palace to meet the emperor and had been detained there by Adrian Sheen. I had racked my brain trying to figure out how he would escape from the palace. I never expected that such an opportunity would appear. Recently, everyone in the household had become extremely busy. My father practically lived in his study and rarely came out even for meals. My mother was occupied every day with the shops and grain business, constantly going in and out. My elder brother Marcus Yun was still in the south investigating the epidemic. Only I had nothing to do. Aside from occasionally helping my mother with small matters related to the shops, I was completely idle. Perhaps because I had been thinking too much, I couldn't fall asleep that night. So I got dressed and went out into the garden for a walk. But the moment I stepped outside, I saw a shadow leap over the wall of our residence. I immediately chased after it. Seeing that the figure was about to escape the estate, I picked up a stone from the ground and threw it. Stop right there. I shouted loudly. The person easily dodged the stone I threw, but instead of jumping over the wall to escape, he stopped in the corner. Where did this thief come from? Just as I was about to continue scolding him, the man in black turned around and pulled down the mask covering his face. By the moonlight, I could clearly see his face. It was Ethan Sheen. The moment I recognized him, the scolding words stuck in my throat. His cold expression was truly frightening. Aren't you supposed to be in the imperial palace? Why are you at my house in the middle of the night? I asked in surprise. I came to speak with your father. I thought carefully about the direction he had been heading just now. It was indeed toward my father Victor Yun's study. The atmosphere suddenly became a little awkward. Oh. Nothing then. Go ahead. I pointed toward the wall, but he didn't move. Is there something else? I asked with my head lowered. His gaze always felt like it carried knives. Under that stare, my eyes wandered around nervously. Then suddenly I noticed a white handkerchief peeking from Ethan Sheen's sleeve. It looked very familiar. This is. I stepped forward 2 steps and pulled it out from his sleeve. Ethan Sheen raised his hand as if to stop me, but he was a moment too late. Pointing at the cloud embroidered on the handkerchief, I asked, "You're keeping my handkerchief?" A girl's personal belonging being carried around by someone else. Do you know how improper that is? There was a trace of anger in my heart. Suddenly I looked up at him. This time, when our eyes met, I wasn't afraid at all. Instead, Ethan Sheen seemed a little flustered. But he quickly regained his composure and spoke calmly. "It is your handkerchief. But I didn't keep it secretly. You gave it to me." "That's impossible. How could I give something so personal to a man from another family?" "This was 5 years ago. In that cave. You used it to cool my fever. You left in a hurry and forgot to take it back. 5 years ago." Under the moonlight, I examined the cloth carefully. It truly didn't look new. Even the edge of the handkerchief had turned slightly yellow. It was clearly something from several years ago. "Well, even so, you shouldn't carry it around with you. What if someone else sees it? Do you still want my reputation to remain intact?" In truth, the handkerchief only had a simple cloud embroidered on it. The design was very ordinary. Even if someone else picked it up, they wouldn't think of me. But I kept remembering how I had saved him as a child, only to be frightened by him. Then years later I saved him again, and his cold face still scared me. The more I thought about it, the more wronged I felt. "It's my fault," he said. He admitted it so quickly that I didn't even have time to react. With such a cold face, I had assumed he must have a stubborn personality. I never expected him to soften his tone so easily. My anger suddenly had nowhere to go. "Fine. Then go. I won't return the handkerchief to you. No need to see you out." I turned around and prepared to return to my room. "Wait." He called after me. Without turning back, I asked, "What is it now?" "This handkerchief has been with me for 5 years. In my heart, it has long been my talisman of safety." I said nothing. No matter what he said, I had already decided not to return it. His Majesty has ordered me to go provide disaster relief. I will depart tomorrow. Then go. What does that have to do with me? This journey. The chances of survival are slim. I don't know if I'll be able to return alive. Why bring up life and death in the middle of the night? It made people uneasy. A gust of night wind blew past. I pulled my clothes tighter around myself. If I die out there this time. Before I die, I might wonder whether it's because I didn't have this handkerchief. Ah. Fine. Take it. Take it. I spun around and shoved the handkerchief into his hand, then ran back to my room as fast as I could. Even while closing the door, I still felt a chill wind blowing behind me. "It's just a handkerchief." Couldn't he talk about it properly without mentioning life and death? That man truly was like the king of hell. 3 days later, Ethan Sheen arrived at several counties that had suffered the most severe disasters. Upon arriving, he immediately sent his subordinates to nearby cities that were still relatively prosperous to open the granaries and transport grain, temporarily easing the most urgent shortages. Soon after, my mother's silver arrived like falling snow. His men used the funds to purchase grain everywhere in the name of the government. The merchants who owned grain shops didn't dare raise their prices, and very quickly large amounts of grain were bought and transported to the disaster areas. The remaining silver was distributed directly to the common people, allowing them to maintain their daily lives. A month later, the disasters in those counties were gradually brought under control. Meanwhile, my mother and I had been distributing porridge outside the capital gates for more than a month. At the beginning, the refugees outside the city stretched endlessly before our eyes, a crowd so dense that no end could be seen. But today, only a few dozen remained. Most people, if they could survive, didn't want to live as wanderers forever. So after Ethan Sheen stabilized the disaster situation, the majority chose to return to their hometowns. My mother gave 10 taels of silver to every refugee willing to go back. It was enough for them to survive until they reached home. At first, my mother was reluctant to let me follow her. But I truly couldn't bear watching her exhaust herself running around every day while I stayed home doing nothing but eating and sleeping. After I begged several times, she finally agreed. As for whether Adrian Sheen might send assassins, we had already long forgotten about that possibility. If he dared to make a move against my mother and me under the current circumstances, he would truly be nothing but a tyrant. Besides, many martial artists had secretly been protecting us the whole time. Before long, my mother and I stopped worrying about it entirely. In our minds there was only one question: how many refugees were left? And how many pots of porridge would be enough? Was the grain supply sufficient? By the time all the refugees in the capital had completely dispersed, another half-month had passed. When the capital finally returned to peace, I understood how my mother had defeated Bianca Bai. Just as my mother had predicted, Bianca Bai had used all the shops she owned to exchange for a large amount of cash, then spent everything buying grain. She had been hoarding grain all along, waiting for the moment when prices reached their peak so she could sell it. But when grain prices rose to 5 times their original value, my mother made her move. She released a massive quantity of grain onto the market, selling it at stable prices. At the same time, she donated large amounts to relieve the refugees outside the city. In an instant, countless people who had hoarded grain were filled with resentment. They had bought grain at high prices, and now they couldn't sell it at all. Many people who clearly understood the situation acted early. They sold their grain in time, and their losses were not too severe. But Bianca Bai was truly ruthless. Even if she had to hold on to resentment, she refused to take a loss. She kept waiting for grain prices to rise even higher. Unfortunately for her, heaven gave her no such opportunity. Now that the disaster had passed, the price of grain had fallen even lower than before. It could be said that Bianca Bai had lost everything. Lydia Luo. Lydia Luo. You plotted against me. Today my mother had gone to inspect the newly acquired shops and happened to run into Bianca Bai, who blocked her path. Oh? So what if I plotted against you? My mother admitted it calmly and without hesitation. You. Bianca Bai pointed at my mother, trembling with rage. Not afraid to tell you this. The pawn shop you sold now belongs to me. Every single shop you once owned is now in my hands. Well? Are you happy? Didn't you say heaven has eyes? Didn't you say that people who do evil would receive retribution? Isn't this your retribution now? Why come shouting in anger in front of me? When I first opened my shop in the capital years ago, you almost crushed me to death with your schemes. Fortunately, I survived. Now your own poor judgment has ruined you. What does that have to do with me? I didn't force you to donate money to the Ministry of Revenue. I didn't force you to sell your shops. I certainly didn't force you to buy and hoard all that grain. I simply couldn't bear to see the refugees suffer, so I lent a helping hand. There were many people in the capital who hoarded grain and were affected because of me. Yet none of them came to accuse me. So what right do you have to come here and complain? My mother's voice grew colder. In this world, the victor becomes king and the loser becomes a bandit. How many shops in the capital have you forced into bankruptcy over the years? If you've done those kinds of things yourself, then don't come here to provoke me. Otherwise people might think you're the kind who sells herself yet still wants to build a shrine to virtue. Her words dripped with contempt. You just wait. I swear I will make every member of the Yun family suffer eternal ruin. None of you will die a good death. Bianca Bai screamed hysterically. Eternal ruin? None of us will die a good death? My mother seemed to hear something extremely amusing. She stepped forward, grabbed Bianca Bai by the collar, and stared at her coldly. And what exactly will you rely on to do that? That husband of yours? A mere fifth-rank official who could never even hope to become Minister Carter of the Ministry of Revenue? Or perhaps the wealth of your natal family, the fortune you've already squandered? Or those two useless sons of yours? As soon as my mother finished speaking, Bianca Bai's face turned bright red with fury. Oh, I almost forgot, my mother added with a mocking smile. You also have a daughter who became empress. But what has that daughter done for you until now? Didn't she even take half of your family fortune as dowry? Why don't you try whispering in His Majesty's ear at night? See if he would dare lay a hand on the Yun family. After saying this, my mother pushed Bianca Bai away, then took out a handkerchief and wiped her hands with obvious disgust. You. Bianca Bai pointed at my mother, but she couldn't form a complete sentence. Finally, she coughed up a mouthful of blood and collapsed unconscious on the spot, after returning from the disaster relief mission. Ethan Cheen gained tremendous fame. He had already held great prestige within the army before, and now he had also won the support of the common people. But after he returned to the capital, Adrian Cheen placed him under house arrest inside the palace. 3 days later, before one wave had settled, another storm rose. A sudden epidemic broke out in the capital and the surrounding cities. At first, it appeared among the palace guards. The first guard developed symptoms of chills, followed by fever, headaches, and body aches. The imperial physicians examined him and diagnosed it as a common cold illness. However, after taking the prescribed medicine, not only did his condition fail to improve, he soon began vomiting and suffering from severe diarrhea. A few days later, he died. Soon afterward, the imperial physician who had treated him, and the people who had come into contact with that guard, began to show the same symptoms. The situation immediately alarmed Chief Imperial Physician Han. He quickly concluded that this was not a simple cold, it was an epidemic. When my father Victor Yun heard the rumors, he immediately wrote a letter to my elder brother Marcus Yun, but unexpectedly, just as the letter was sent out, my brother returned home. After hearing father recount what was happening in the capital, my brother immediately confirmed something. The epidemic in the capital and the one I encountered in that small southern city are most likely the same disease. The timing is too coincidental for it to appear simultaneously in the capital and several nearby cities. I suspect someone may have deliberately spread poison from afar. Marcus Yun spoke with a grave expression, but Luna Xiao has already tested a prescription that can cure this disease in that southern town. I also learned some experience dealing with this epidemic there. There's no need to worry. It can be brought under control soon. My brother quickly wrote out a list of all the supplies needed for prevention and treatment and handed it to my mother. All infected patients must be sent to farms outside the city for isolation. Cut off the source of transmission. They must take this prescription 3 times a day. The fastest recovery will take half a month. At most, 1 month for a full recovery. As for these preventive measures, mother can prepare them in advance. They can ensure a 90% chance of avoiding infection. Aside from providing them free of charge to those who were caring for patients at the farms, my brother said my mother could also combine these preventive supplies into packages and sell them to the officials and nobles in the capital who were terrified and panicking about the epidemic, while my mother began following my brother Marcus Yun's instructions step by step. Secretly stockpiling the necessary materials, chaos had already broken out inside the imperial palace. Servants in the palace were continuously being diagnosed with the disease. The officials were thrown into panic as well. Several nearby cities submitted memorials asking Adrian Sheen to send someone to stabilize the people's hearts. From top to bottom, the entire court was filled with fear. In the end, Adrian Sheen once again sent Ethan Sheen. This decision happened to align perfectly with my father's expectations. After hearing the news, my father Victor Yun immediately told Marcus Yun to take Luna Xiao with him to assist Ethan Sheen in treating patients and saving lives. There was no time to delay. Ethan Sheen followed my brother's suggestion and had him write out a method for epidemic prevention. Afterward, many copies were made and distributed to the officials governing several cities around the capital. A copy was also sent to Chief Imperial Physician Han at the Imperial Medical Institute within the capital. Then the three of them each put on protective clothing and rode through the night to the city closest to the capital where the epidemic had begun to spread. Step by step, they supervised and assisted with controlling the outbreak. Within the palace, the sick were handled by the Imperial Medical Institute. As for the common people in the capital, my mother gathered all the infected patients and transported them to farms outside the city for isolation. She also distributed the protective clothing she had prepared in advance to the physicians treating the sick and to those caring for the patients. Fortunately, the disease had been discovered early, and the number of infected people was still relatively small. Within just 2 days, every patient in the capital had been relocated outside the city. However, even though Chief Imperial Physician Han had declared that treatment with the prescription would cure patients in at most 1 month, people had not yet seen the results. Fear still spread everywhere. Many citizens rushed to my mother's shop to buy the epidemic prevention packages. My mother repeatedly reassured them. There is no need to panic. All families with infected members in the capital have already been isolated at the farms outside the city. The surrounding neighbors have also each received a free prevention package from me. As long as everyone follows the precautions carefully, there will be no problem. But many people still insisted on buying them. They feared that someone else might fail to protect themselves properly, walk outside, and infect them. Since my mother couldn't persuade them otherwise, she stopped trying. If you have money and want to spend it, I won't stop you. The cost of producing one prevention package was 5 taels of silver, and my mother sold them at exactly that price. She did not raise the price because of the epidemic. The wealthy merchants who had previously hoarded grain and suffered losses because of my mother now treated her much more kindly. They no longer pointed fingers behind her back or spoke ill of her. As for the officials in the capital who had good relations with our family, my mother gifted each of them one package. Among the 5 great families, the household of Lady Grant, the wife of Marshal Grant, also received packages according to the number of people in their residence. For the rest, those who had not slandered our family during the 100 Flowers banquet, my mother sold the packages for 5 taels. But for those who had once trampled over me and mocked me, one package costs 1,000 taels. Buy it or not, it's your choice. My mother even implemented a real name purchase system. Each person could only buy one package. If you buy it for someone else, then you yourself will not get one. Whether you want to keep your money or your life, that's up to you. Over the past few days, the wives and relatives of those officials who had once spoken badly about our family came one after another to purchase the prevention packages. They ground their teeth in hatred while looking at my mother. yet they still had to force bright smiles and pay hundreds of times the normal price to buy them. Watching their expressions was extremely satisfying. About a day later, Bianca arrived carrying 4,000 taels in banknotes. My mother refused to accept them. "You're not like the others. For your family, it's 10,000 taels per person." "Why?" Bianca demanded angrily. "Isn't your daughter the empress? Your family is naturally more honorable than others. If you want it, then take it. If not, forget it. Don't block my business." Bianca cursed loudly and stormed away. The next day, she returned carrying 40,000 taels in banknotes. Her whole body looked weak and limp as she handed over the money. Her eyes were red with rage, as if she wished she could tear my mother apart. "So, Bianca my mother asked with a smile, "how does it feel to lose everything?" In order to buy the prevention packages, Bianca had finally been forced to sell the grain she had been hoarding. But by now grain prices were no longer high. In total, she had only managed to sell them for a little over 20,000 taels. I heard that she tried to borrow the remaining money from Sophia Chu, but Sophia Chu didn't have it. In the end, Bianca returned home and sold every valuable item she possessed. Even the heirloom jade she had passed down through generations was sold before she could barely gather enough money. When Bianca saw the smile on my mother's face, she was so furious that she nearly fainted again. 1 week later, the Dali Court and the Ministry of Justice jointly investigated the epidemic case. They finally discovered the source of the outbreak. It turned out that former subordinates of Prince Gong had deliberately spread the disease in revenge for him. They secretly scattered clothing and belongings belonging to infected patients from the southern town throughout the capital and several surrounding cities. A month later, the epidemic in the capital was completely brought under control. Another month passed, and the surrounding cities were also stabilized. Marcus Yun, Luna Xiao, and Ethan Chin were finally preparing to return to the capital. In the early hours before dawn, my mother shook me awake while I was half asleep. She covered my mouth with her hand and whispered for me not to make a sound. Then she led me quietly to the back gate. To my surprise, I discovered that every maid, servant woman, and servant boy in our household was already gathered there waiting. My brother Marcus Yun had also returned. He and Luna Xiao were sitting on horseback. Ethan Chin was there as well. He stood beside the carriage with my father Victor Yun. "Madam, take Evelyn Yun with you to the estate. Everything will be resolved very soon. Don't worry." My father Victor Yun held my mother's hand as he spoke. At that moment, Ethan Chin walked over to my side. In his usually cold eyes, there was now a faint trace of unfamiliar emotion. "Don't be afraid," he said. Even his voice was far gentler than usual. Still half asleep, I looked at him. He looked back at me, then suddenly raised his hand and placed it on my head. Instinctively, I stepped back to avoid him. His hand froze in midair, slowly curling into a fist before lowering again. He slipped it into his robe. A moment later, he took out a small, exquisitely crafted dagger and handed it to me, for protection. I hesitated for a moment but still accepted it. The carriage soon began moving. The figures of my father, my brother, and Ethan Chin grew smaller and smaller until they eventually disappeared from sight. I withdrew my gaze and looked at Luna Xiao, who was lying unconscious inside the carriage. She had originally planned to go with my brother, but Marcus Yun had knocked her out. Before we departed, I couldn't help sighing once again. My brother's road to winning his wife might have just become even longer. About an hour later, we arrived at the estate. Judging by the distance, we had clearly already left the capital. The servants quickly prepared the bedrooms in the estate. My mother told me not to think too much and urged me to go back to my room to sleep. But after lying down in bed, although I had been very sleepy during the journey. I suddenly couldn't fall asleep. My mind kept replaying the image of my father and brother growing smaller and smaller in the distance until they vanished completely. Anxiety filled my heart. Unconsciously, I tightened my grip on the dagger Ethan Sheen had given me. Only then did I feel slightly more at ease. As I touched the dagger, I suddenly felt that something was strange. It seemed that something had been engraved on it. Using the candlelight, I looked more closely. To my surprise, it was a small cloud engraving. It looked as if it had been carved by hand, and the shape looked remarkably similar to the cloud embroidered on my handkerchief. I gently traced the carving with my finger, staring at it without blinking. At some point, while looking at it again and again, I fell asleep. When I woke up again, daylight had already broken outside. I hurriedly got out of bed and ran outside. My mother was sitting in the middle of the courtyard, her gaze fixed on the gate. I had no idea how long she had been sitting there. Luna Xiao was there too. She stood beside my mother, also staring at the gate. I walked over and stood beside them. Not long after, someone suddenly knocked on the large gate outside. Just as Luna Xiao and I were about to open it, my mother stopped us and went herself. When the door opened, it turned out to be one of Ethan Sheen's subordinates. My mother immediately let out a long sigh of relief. I also felt as if I had narrowly escaped disaster. Ethan Sheen's subordinate escorted us into the imperial palace. My mother was taken away to find my father. Luna Xiao asked the guard to lead her to my brother. As for me, I was escorted by Ethan Sheen's subordinate to the Xianjing Hall. On the way there, I gradually learned what had happened. The epidemic in the city surrounding the capital should have ended along with the capital last month. However, when Adrian Sheen saw how much public support Ethan Sheen had gained, he secretly ordered someone to poison people again, creating a new outbreak. His goal was to accuse Ethan Sheen of negligence and punish him. For the sake of his own interests, he was willing to risk the lives of countless common people. This completely enraged both my brother and Ethan Sheen. After discussing it, they both agreed that the time had come. They decided unanimously to rebel. As for my father, he had been forced into this situation. But he must have prepared for it long ago. Otherwise he would never have entered the palace so quickly. When Ethan Sheen's subordinate brought me into Xianjing Hall, I froze at the sight inside. In the middle of the great hall, Ethan Sheen stood tall and upright. At his feet knelt a woman. It was Sophia Chu, Prince of Northern Defense. Ying has admired you for a long time. Please don't kill me. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Sophia Chu cried as she spoke, reaching out as if to grab Ethan Sheen's sleeve. But he avoided her. You'll do whatever I ask? Ethan Sheen asked calmly, his eyes cold as ice. Yes. Yes. Sophia Chu nodded desperately, as if clutching her final lifeline. Very well, Ethan Sheen said coldly. Then go kill Adrian Sheen. Kill. Kill His Majesty. One life for another. If you want to live, naturally you must help me kill someone. Sophia Chu stared into his icy eyes. After a moment, as if she had made up her mind, she whispered, "All right. But since Ying has done such a great thing for your highness, after success, could your highness grant Ying a place in the imperial harem?" Ethan Sheen lowered his head and looked at her. Suddenly, he laughed. The people around Adrian Sheen are truly exactly like him. As soon as he finished speaking, he clapped his hands. The side door immediately opened. Adrian Sheen was dragged inside by two imperial guards. A rag had been stuffed into his mouth. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Sophia Chu as if he wanted to devour her alive. Seeing him like this, Sophia Chu's whole body began trembling. Ethan Sheen waved his hand. the Imperial Guards released Adrian Chien, the moment he was freed. Adrian Chien lunged straight towards Sophia Chu, terrified. Sophia Chu stumbled backward, trying to hide behind Ethan Chien. But Ethan Chien had already stepped aside and was now standing beside the dragon throne. "Why, Your Majesty?" Sophia Chu cried, trembling. But before she could finish speaking, Adrian Chien had already reached her. He slammed her head down against the floor. "You wretched bitch. I treated you so well, and you dare betray me." My father held my mother's hand. At that same moment, Ethan Chien walked over and stopped beside me. In his usually cold eyes, there seemed to be a trace of unfamiliar emotion. "Don't be afraid," he said. His voice was much gentler than usual. Half asleep, I looked up at him. He looked back at me and suddenly raised his hand, placing it on top of my head. Instinctively, I stepped aside to avoid his touch. His hand froze in midair, slowly curling into a fist before lowering. Then he slipped it into his robe. Not long after, he took out a small, exquisite dagger and handed it to me, for self-defense. I hesitated for a moment but eventually accepted it. The carriage soon began to move. The figures of my father, my brother, and Ethan Chien grew smaller and smaller until they eventually disappeared from sight. I withdrew my gaze and looked at Luna Xiao, who was lying unconscious inside the carriage. She had originally planned to go with my brother, but in the end he had knocked her out. Before setting off, I couldn't help sighing once again. It seemed that my brother's road to winning his wife's heart had just grown a little longer. About an hour later, we arrived at the estate. Judging by the distance, we had already left the capital city. The servants quickly cleaned and prepared the bedrooms inside the manor. My mother told me not to overthink things and sent me back to my room to rest, but when I finally lay down, although I had been extremely sleepy on the road, I suddenly couldn't fall asleep. In my mind, the images of my father and brother growing smaller and smaller kept replaying again and again, until they completely disappeared. Anxiety filled my heart. Unconsciously, I gripped the dagger Ethan Chien had given me, which I kept close to my chest. Only then did I feel slightly more at ease. As I touched the dagger, I suddenly felt that something was strange. It seemed that something had been engraved on it. Borrowing the light of the candle, I looked closely. It was a cloud. The carving looked as if it had been etched by hand, and its shape looked remarkably similar to the pattern embroidered on my handkerchief. I gently traced the engraved lines with my finger, staring at it without blinking. Before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. When I woke up again, daylight had already filled the sky. I hurriedly got up and went outside. My mother was sitting in the middle of the courtyard, staring toward the gate. I didn't know how long she had been sitting there. Luna Xiao was there as well. She stood beside my mother, her gaze also fixed on the gate. I walked over and stood next to them. We had only been standing there for a short while when suddenly someone knocked on the main gate. My mother stopped Luna Xiao and me, who were about to open the door, and went herself. Outside was one of Ethan Chien's subordinates. My mother immediately let out a sigh of relief, and I also felt as though I had just escaped a calamity. The subordinate led us into the imperial palace. My mother was taken away to find my father. Luna Xiao was led away to find my brother. As for me, I was escorted by Ethan Chien's subordinate to Xianjing Hall. On the way there, I gradually learned about the situation. The plague in several cities surrounding the capital should have ended, together with the one in the capital last month. However, Adrian Chien saw that Ethan Chien had gained too much support from the people. So he secretly sent someone to poison the area again, deliberately triggering another outbreak of the plague. His goal was to frame Ethan Chien, regardless of the suffering of the common people, all for his own benefit. Such actions completely enraged both my brother and Ethan Sheen. After discussing it together, they both believed the time had finally come. They unanimously decided to rebel. As for my father, he had been forced into this situation. Yet he must have made preparations beforehand, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to enter the imperial palace so quickly. When Ethan Sheen's subordinate brought me into Xianjing Hall, I froze at the scene before me. In the middle of the great hall, Ethan Sheen stood upright. At his feet, a woman was kneeling on the ground. It was Sophia Chu. "My lord, I have admired you for a long time. Please don't kill me. I'll do anything you ask. Anything," she cried while speaking, reaching out to grab Ethan Sheen's robe. But he stepped aside and avoided her. "You'll do whatever I ask?" Ethan Sheen asked calmly, his gaze as cold as ice. "Yes. Yes. Yes." Sophia Chu nodded frantically, as though she had finally grasped a lifeline. "Good. Then go kill Adrian Sheen. I will spare your life." Kill. Kill His Majesty?" she stammered. "One life for another," Ethan Sheen said coldly. "If you want to live, naturally you must help me kill someone." Sophia Chu stared into his icy eyes. After a long moment, as if she had made up her mind, she whispered, "All right. But if I help your highness accomplish such a great task, after you succeed, could your highness give me a place in the imperial harem?" Ethan Sheen lowered his head and looked at her. Suddenly, he laughed. The people around Adrian Sheen really are exactly like him. After saying that, he clapped his hands. A side door immediately opened. Adrian Sheen was escorted inside by 2 imperial guards. His mouth had been stuffed shut, but the moment he saw Sophia Chu, his eyes turned blood red, as if he wanted to devour her alive. Seeing him like that, Sophia Chu trembled all over. Ethan Sheen waved his hand, and the imperial guards released Adrian Sheen. The moment he was freed, he lunged towards Sophia Chu. Terrified, she kept retreating, trying to hide behind Ethan Sheen. But Ethan Sheen had already stepped aside, standing calmly beside the dragon throne. Before long, Sophia Chu had stopped breathing. After venting all his rage, Adrian Sheen collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. He probably realized that he would lose his life here today. His face was ashen with despair, but then his gaze accidentally swept toward the doorway, where I was standing. His eyes instantly lit up. "Connor. Connor. You came. You came to save me, didn't you? I knew it. You've always treated me the best. It was all my fault before. I shouldn't have listened to Sophia Chu's instigation. If I had married you, with your father and your maternal grandfather supporting me, I would never have ended up like this today." When Adrian Sheen saw me, his expression turned completely insane. He suddenly stood up and rushed toward me. "Stop him!" Ethan Sheen shouted sharply. 2 imperial guards immediately forced Adrian Sheen to the ground. "Who allowed you to bring her here at this time?" Ethan Sheen strode over to me and asked his subordinate sternly. The subordinate immediately knelt down. "Your Highness, please forgive me. I thought you wished to see Miss Yun immediately, so I hurried and miscalculated the timing. Tomorrow, come receive 10 strokes." "Yes, Your Highness." The subordinate stood up and stepped aside. Now only Ethan Sheen and I remained facing each other. "Stay with me. Don't run around," he said seriously, looking directly into my eyes. I nodded instinctively. He led me further into the hall. Adrian Sheen, whose right cheek was pressed against the ground, watched us walk inside together. His eyes burned with fury. You. You too. Evelyn Yun, have you no shame? He roared. The next moment, Ethan Sheen kicked him hard in the chest. His back slammed against a pillar, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. If you don't know how to speak properly, you don't need that tongue, Ethan Sheen said coldly. Adrian Sheen curled up on the ground, clutching his chest. His mouth opened slightly, but he didn't dare utter another word. Looking down at him with disdain, Ethan Sheen then asked his subordinate, "Has Helena Chen been brought here?" "Her Majesty the Empress Dowager is already waiting outside." "Bring her in." Soon, Helena Chen, the Empress Dowager, hurried inside. The moment she saw Adrian Sheen lying in the corner of the hall, she screamed and rushed over. "My son! My son! Don't scare your mother like this." Only after seeing him open his eyes did she finally breathe a sigh of relief. "Ethan Sheen. My son is the son of heaven. If you dare harm him, you will be despised by all the people," she said coldly. "Don't worry," Ethan Sheen replied calmly. "The one who will be despised by the people can only be him." After saying that, he threw 2 daggers onto the floor in front of them. "I'm a generous man. You killed my father. 1 life for 1 life, that's enough. I won't kill both of you. You can discuss it carefully. Today, which one of you will walk out of this door? You want us mother and son to kill each other? Dream on." Helena Chen shouted furiously, "I'll only give you this one chance. I'll count to 3. If you still haven't decided, then both of you will go to hell together. 3. Ethan Sheen slowly spoke the number. "If you want to kill us, then just do it. Why say so much nonsense?" Helena Chen sneered. "My son would never kill me. We will never give you what you want." But before she could finish speaking, a dagger suddenly pierced into her back. It was Adrian Sheen. She turned around slowly, disbelief written all over her face. At that moment, Ethan Sheen suddenly turned and blocked my line of sight. Then a large warm hand covered my eyes. "Don't look." I pushed his hand away. I had already seen far worse scenes before. Compared to the blood-soaked figure I once saw of him, this was nothing. When Ethan Sheen looked at me, a trace of regret flashed through his eyes. "I shouldn't have let you stay." "You were the one who let me stay," I said, "and now you want me to leave. Why do men change their minds so easily?" Behind us, Adrian Sheen's trembling voice could be heard. "Mother. I'm sorry. You're already old. I still have many years left to live. Just help me one more time." I looked over. He didn't even dare meet Helena Chen's eyes as he spoke. Tears streamed down her face. Then her expression suddenly turned vicious. She lunged forward, trying to strangle him. But Adrian Sheen stabbed her several more times. The Empress Dowager collapsed to the ground, dead, with her eyes still open. "I truly underestimated your cruelty," Ethan Sheen said coldly. "I thought you only attacked your brothers and uncles. I didn't expect that even blood ties mean nothing to you. You even dared to kill your own mother. You forced me into this." Adrian Sheen screamed madly. Then he looked at Ethan Sheen cautiously. "You won't break your promise and kill me, right? So many people here saw everything. If you go back on your word, how will you convince the people in the future?" "I don't need you to teach me how to rule," Ethan Sheen said disdainfully. "Don't worry. I absolutely will not take your life. Not only that, I will keep you alive for the rest of it." He turned to the guards. "Spread the word. His Majesty is deeply aware of his grave sins and voluntarily abdicates the throne to me. Soon he will personally write a letter of apology to the people. The Empress Dowager has passed away from illness. His Majesty is grief-stricken and, in gratitude for her years of care, has decided to guard her tomb at the Imperial Mausoleum for the rest of his life. Hearing this, Adrian Chen's eyes nearly split with rage. You are truly vicious. With that, he grabbed a dagger and tried to stab Ethan Chen. The Imperial guards immediately subdued him, cut off one of his legs. Ethan Chen ordered coldly, throw him into the Imperial Mausoleum. Guard him carefully. Do not let him die. Every day, he needs to do nothing except kneel before his mother's spirit tablet and repent. Yes, Your Highness. Adrian Chen was dragged away. Before leaving the hall, his curses echoed endlessly until the guards gagged him and pulled him away. 3 days later, Ethan Chen ascended the throne. Adrian Chen's crime of deliberately creating the plague for personal gain was publicly announced, and he was scorned by the people. Whether they feared Ethan Chen's power or truly despised Adrian Chen, none of the civil officials in the court spoke a single word in his defense. They directly acknowledged Ethan Chen as the new emperor. Among the military generals, half admired my father, and half admired Ethan Chen. And since my father himself supported Ethan Chen's ascension, naturally, no one dared to say otherwise. Half a month after Ethan Chen ascended the throne, he carried out a major action. He launched a strict investigation into corrupt officials and uncovered a large group of them. At the center of it all were Minister Carter, the Minister of Revenue, and the Bai family. The amount of silver confiscated shocked even my mother. From that alone, one could imagine how severe the corruption had been. Minister Carter and the other main culprits were sentenced to execution in the autumn. The rest of their relatives who had been implicated were exiled, and for 3 generations none of them would be allowed to serve as officials. Bianca Bai's family also failed to escape exile. Originally, Bianca Bai had owned a shop in the capital. She had not been particularly greedy. But later, my mother pressured her so fiercely that she eventually lost all her wealth. At that time, Sophia Chu, in order not to appear embarrassed in front of Adrian Chen and Helena Chen, had ignored the safety of her own family and refused to lend the 10,000 taels of silver that could have saved Bianca Bai. Filled with anger, and under the instigation of Lady Carter, Bianca Bai eventually became involved in those corrupt dealings as well. Only then did the matter finally come to an end. These past few days, my mother had been in an excellent mood. Every day at home she rewarded the servants 3 separate times. Even the clerks and shop managers in our family's businesses in the capital all received a share of the rewards. My eldest brother and Luna Xiao, for reasons unknown, had seen their relationship progress rapidly recently. It seemed that good news might soon be on the horizon. With no rivals left for my mother in the capital, she became somewhat bored. One day, she suddenly pulled me aside and asked, "Do you have someone you like? Didn't you say you would keep me at home for the rest of my life?" I clutched my chest and pretended to look heartbroken. "Why are you already tired of me staying at home?" "Well, look," my mother said. "Now that Adrian Chen is no longer the emperor, no one brings up the matter of your broken engagement anymore. I was just thinking, if you happen to like someone, bring him back so we can talk. Whether the marriage actually happens isn't important. After all, your elder brother's marriage is about to be arranged. It's just that everything with him moved too quickly. I didn't even have time to feel any excitement before he already brought his wife home. So now I can only rely on you." In other words, She simply felt there wasn't enough excitement and wanted to find some entertainment involving me. My mother certainly had maternal affection, but not very much of it. Later, seeing that I was staying home all day, she simply chased me outside, saying that if I stayed inside all the time, how could I ever meet anyone? Very soon, the capital held its lantern festival. The moment we finished dinner, my mother drove me out of the house. I took a maid with me and wandered through the streets, eating and drinking. When we reached the lakeside, I saw people releasing sky lanterns. Curious, I ran over to join in the fun. I had never released a sky lantern before, but unexpectedly, when I arrived, I saw a familiar figure. Ethan Sheen was there as well. He stood looking up at the lanterns floating in the sky. His face showed no expression, yet it seemed as if a heavy loneliness surrounded him. Without thinking, I walked toward him. "What a coincidence," I said. He glanced sideways and noticed me. Turning around, he smiled. "Yes." I responded softly. Since that meeting in the Great Hall, nearly a month had passed without us seeing each other. Now that we met again, it strangely felt as though an entire lifetime had passed. Today, he was not wearing the black robes he usually wore. Instead, he was dressed in a white robe. When he smiled, it felt like ice and snow melting. He looked incredibly captivating. Under his intense gaze, I suddenly didn't know what to do with my hands. Unexpectedly, his eyes fell on my waist. "The dagger I gave you. You're still carrying it?" Following his gaze, I lowered my head and looked at the dagger hanging at my waist. "This dagger is more convenient than the ones I used before," I said honestly. "I've gotten used to carrying it with me. The dagger you gave me works very well." I praised him sincerely. He looked at me, and suddenly smiled even more brightly. For a moment I was completely mesmerized by that smile. When I finally came back to my senses, I almost wanted to slap myself. I was already this old, yet I still couldn't resist a bit of good looks. "Well, did you come here to release lanterns too? I still have something to do." My face felt slightly hot and embarrassed. I tried to find an excuse to leave, but before I could finish speaking, Ethan Sheen interrupted me. "I came here to release a lantern for my father. My mother passed away early. I was an only child, raised entirely by my father. Now that he has left me in this world, I no longer have a single family member." Perhaps mentioning the lanterns had stirred up his sorrow. He suddenly spoke in a low, melancholic tone. Seeing the sadness on his face made me feel somewhat guilty. Before I could say anything, he took 2 steps closer to me. Only then did I catch the faint smell of alcohol coming from him. He had been drinking, standing beside me. Ethan Sheen looked toward a candied hawthorn vendor not far away. "When my father was alive, he often bought candied hawthorn for me," he said quietly. "Back then I was already grown and didn't really like eating it. I would take a bite and then throw the rest away. Now, even if I wanted to eat it, there's probably no one left who would buy it for me." He looked in that direction and gave a bitter smile. Seeing that expression made me feel even worse. Thinking that I had unintentionally stirred up his sorrow, I quickly walked toward the vendor. "Stay here. Don't go anywhere," I called out. "I'll go buy one for you." A moment later, I ran back and handed him the candied hawthorn. "Actually, there's something I haven't finished saying." He looked at me, and the emotion in his eyes suddenly grew stronger. "When my father was alive, he once told me, besides him, whoever becomes the second person to buy me candied hawthorn, I should marry that person and bring her home as his daughter-in-law." The topic changed so suddenly that I was startled. The candied hawthorn slipped from my hand and fell to the ground. When the candied hawthorn slipped from my hand, Ethan Sheen caught it. He calmly took it from me, raised it to his mouth, and bit into it. Then he looked straight at me, his gaze burning with intensity. "Would you be willing to become my empress?" His words struck me like thunder. Frightened, I turned and ran away. Even after returning home, my head was still spinning. I had no idea how things had suddenly developed to the point of discussing marriage. Early the next morning, before the sun had even fully risen, my mother dragged me out of bed. "Ethan Sheen has come to our house to propose marriage." I froze on the spot. About an hour later, Ethan Sheen left our residence. My mother immediately summoned me to her bedroom, where my father was also waiting. Together they began interrogating me. "Well done," my mother said. "I told you to go out every day and find someone you like. Yet you refused. So it turns out you already had someone in your heart. I raised you and your brother all these years. Didn't I deserve at least a little gossip about your love lives?" One by one, both of you quietly settled the most important matters of your lives without telling me. Do you have no consideration for your poor mother? Although my mother was questioning me, the more she spoke, the more her words drifted off track. I felt both helpless and speechless. "I truly had nothing with Ethan Sheen before this," I tried to explain. But my mother didn't believe a single word. She said that when she had previously asked my elder brother about his relationship with Luna Xiao, he had also claimed there was nothing between them, and now, my brother practically wished he could tie himself to Luna Xiao's back with a rope and follow her everywhere. No matter how far your relationship has progressed, this marriage, right now, I do not agree with it," my mother declared, slamming the table. "Why?" I hadn't even spoken yet when my father anxiously asked. "Ethan Sheen is 5 years older than Connor." "He's too old," my mother said with disdain. My father suddenly fell silent. After a moment, he spoke with a somewhat wounded expression. "I'm 9 years older than you. Do you also think I became old long ago? I'm talking about Connor's matter right now. Don't start trouble for no reason," my mother warned. For once, my father did not back down. "You said this is Connor's matter. Then you should ask what she thinks. You can't destroy her entire life just because of your own opinions." My mother instinctively wanted to argue, but after frowning and thinking for a moment, she turned to me. "So, what do you think about this marriage?" What could I possibly say? Was I supposed to tell them that Ethan Sheen had insisted on marrying me because of a single candied hawthorn and a sentence his father once said? Did I have no pride left? "Madam, there is a guard outside," a servant suddenly reported. "He says His Majesty sent him to deliver a letter to Mississippi. Should we accept it?" I was still trying to figure out how to answer my mother when the maid standing outside the door suddenly spoke. "Accept it? Of course we accept it." After giving the order, my mother turned back to look at me. "He's even sending love letters now, yet you still claim there's nothing between you two? It can't be a love letter," I said firmly. "If you don't believe me, just read it later." I'm sure that after proposing yesterday, he went back, calmed down, and now regrets it. He must feel that he shouldn't have made such a rash promise about his entire life. So now he's writing to tell me not to agree. I hurriedly explained. My mother stared at me for a moment. I looked back at her with the most sincere expression I could manage. "Don't believe you," she said slowly. Those 2 words instantly made my chest feel tight. "Then just read it," I said. Soon the maid brought the letter inside. Right in front of my parents, I quickly opened it. "See? It definitely isn't." My words stopped abruptly. "What? What was this?" I stared at the bold, flowing calligraphy on the paper, and my vision nearly went dark. My mother read it aloud, word by word. "From the moment we first met, I was astonished. after spending time together, my heart could no longer remain unmoved. She glanced at me, with such solid evidence. You still want to lie to me? In the end, the marriage was settled. The reason was simple. When I tried to open my mouth to refuse, I realized the words were incredibly difficult to say. In my mind, images kept flashing one after another. Sometimes it was the handkerchief Ethan Sheen had noticed that night. Sometimes it was the way he looked at me during the dawn of the palace coup. Sometimes it was the moment when he covered my eyes in the great hall. Even the dagger at my waist made my heart restless, and in the end, all those memories merged into the lonely, sorrowful figure of him standing by the lake during the Lantern Festival. It was as if, in that vast world, he had been left completely alone. The next day, Ethan Sheen issued an imperial decree appointing me as empress. Furthermore, the decree clearly stated that I would be the only empress in the imperial palace. No additional concubines would ever be taken. For a time, many officials in the court were dissatisfied. They had originally hoped to send their daughters into the palace. But Ethan Sheen handled the matter very directly. On that very day, he ordered all the ministers who submitted such memorials to stand outside the door of the imperial study for an entire day. They were not allowed food, not even a sip of water. Later on, anyone who dared to submit such a memorial would receive the exact same treatment. Gradually, no one dared to mention the matter again. The wedding between Ethan Sheen and me was scheduled 3 months later. The date had actually been chosen by me. Deep down, I still felt somewhat uneasy, and I wanted to use that time to sort out my emotions. The night before the wedding, Luna Xiao came to visit me. I had long considered her my future sister-in-law. So I told her everything in my heart. After listening to my story about the Lantern Festival, her expression suddenly became rather strange. It was as if she had suddenly realized something. What's wrong? I asked in confusion. Men who are drunk 3 parts are acting 7 parts until you cry, she said through clenched teeth. I thought carefully about her words. After a while, I suddenly understood something. Ethan Sheen had been acting. Just as I was wondering whether it was still possible to cancel the wedding in time, Luna Xiao suddenly stood up. Where are you going? I asked. I have something to discuss with your brother, she said coldly. I'll come back to see you later. Seeing the anger on her face, a thought suddenly flashed through my mind. Wait. Did my brother act like this with you before too? Luna Xiao gave a cold laugh. She said nothing, simply pulling a silver needle from her waist before walking out with a dark expression. Not long after she left, my mother came in. Finished talking? She said. Come here. Mother needs to teach you a few things. She sat beside me and tossed several small books into my hands. At first I thought they were just storybooks, but when I opened them, I nearly screamed and immediately threw them away. They were Spring Palace illustrations. Mother, why are you showing me this? My face instantly turned bright red with embarrassment. What do you mean why? She said calmly, this is what every mother teaches her daughter before she gets married. When I got married back then, your grandmother taught me the same way. Then she stuffed the books back into my hands and patiently explained everything. By the time she finished, all I wanted to do was bury my head under the blankets. On the wedding night, Ethan Sheen entered the room and lifted my bridal veil. The room was filled with bright red decorations. Dressed in his wedding robes, he looked even more handsome than he had in that moon-white robe the night of the Lantern Festival. But when he came closer, I caught the faint scent of alcohol on him. Suddenly, I remembered what Luna Xiao had said about the Lantern Festival. My head instantly cooled down. Stop right there. I grabbed the stick in my hand and held it out to block him. Wife, why are you angry? Ethan Sheen asked. Perhaps because he had drunk a little too much wine, His face was slightly flushed. He tilted his head and looked at me. The cold indifference that usually filled his eyes had completely disappeared. What remained was only gentleness, as if he could tolerate everything in the world. I shook my head, reminding myself that I must not be bewitched by him. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Back at the Lantern Festival. Were you acting? You used my guilt and sympathy so that I wouldn't be able to refuse you." Ethan Sheen's eyes flickered for a moment. Then he smiled. "My wife is very clever." "Clever?" Calling me stupid would be closer to the truth. Now I was truly angry. "Go outside. Tonight I want to sleep alone." I turned my face away, not wanting to look at him. But Ethan Sheen did not leave. He simply snatched the stick from my hand and pressed his entire body down toward me. "What are you doing?" I pushed him angrily. He grabbed both of my wrists and pinned them down on either side of my pillow. "If my wife didn't have me in her heart," he whispered softly beside my neck, "how could my acting possibly have worked?" I wanted to argue back, but no matter how I thought about it, I couldn't find a proper rebuttal. Still, I was angry and didn't want to look at him. I raised my hands, trying to push him away, but he suddenly lowered his head. His warm breath brushed against my neck. In an instant, the last thread of restraint in my mind snapped. All thoughts of anger, of refusing him, vanished. None of it mattered anymore. But after half an hour had passed, he still didn't know what to do. "Are you incapable or something?" I finally calmed down, my mind gradually returning to normal. Because I was still irritated, my courage suddenly grew, and I began speaking recklessly. "Ha." Ethan Sheen's expression instantly darkened. He lowered his head again. But in the end, it was still me who slowly guided him before everything was finally completed. By the middle of the night, I had already begun to regret it. When I saw the faint light of dawn appearing outside the window, I was completely exhausted. If I could turn back time, I would have returned to last night and knocked myself unconscious. If he didn't know how, then fine. Why on earth did I have to teach him? The end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.